Alrighty, hello everybody, my name is Amii and welcome back to... Nobody's... Wait a minute. Hello everybody, and my name is Amii and welcome to Amii's Time Machine, a one-episode series that I plan on making very exciting indeed. Now, I'm not only doing this because of the fact that it's an assignment, but more so because what I'm about to share with you is actually pretty interesting. Amidst the Cold War, 1960s United States sought to contain the tyrannical spread of... You guessed it, communism. Engaging with small countries in the Eastern Hemisphere, the US fought wars and battles in the name of freedom from communist ideals and for the liberty of democracy. For the opposing force, it was difficult to retaliate and truly injure America. So what did they do? They took the fight to them. Later discovering that big bad communists were boys closer than ever before. The American people did what they always do during times like this. Panic. The occurrence would grow and rise to become what is formally known now as the Cuban Missile Crisis. So I am going to be talking about today about 10 things you may or may not have known about the Cuban Missile Crisis. So, let's go, I guess. Number 1. Did you know that the Soviets relied on checkered shirts and civilian clothing to sneak thousands of troops into Cuba? Like, no joke. Beginning of the summer of 1962, the Soviets came up with a pretty darn strategic plan, which they called Operation Anadir. Or, I just slaughtered that name, I know. Yeah, so they used this thing to ship thousands of combat troops to Cuba. A few thousand soldiers donned and wore checkered shirts to, pose as civilian people, normal, everyday guys, and it kind of worked. Many more were issued Arctic equipment to throw off the scent, sent aboard a fleet of 85 ships and then told them to stay below the docks for, the long voyage in order to go undetected. Whatever that means. Well, the CIA estimated on October 20th, 1962, that 6,000 to 8,000 Soviet troops were stationed in Cuba. The true number was more than about 40,000. Yeah, way to go, CIA. Number 2. The U-2 aerial photographs were analyzed inside a secret office above, guess what? A used car dealership. So remember that 5 guys down the street? It's actually a U-2 aerial secret communist base. The critical photographs snapped by U-2, spy planes over Cuba were shipped for analysis to a top secret, you heard it here first, top secret CIA facility in one of the most unlikely locations ever. Building above the Stuart Ford car dealership in a rundown section of Washington, D.C. While used car salesmen were wheeling and dealing downstairs on October 1962, upstairs the CIA analysts in the state-of-the-art National Photographic Interpretation Center, or the NPIC, were working around the clock to scour hundreds of photographs for even small evidence of Soviet missile sites under construction in Cuba. Yeah, that's definitely what they did. Number 3. President Kennedy's aides drafted a speech announcing a military invasion of Cuba. In a dramatic primetime address on October 22nd, 1962, Mr. Kennedy informed the nation of the naval blockade around Cuba that they had put. An alternative speech with a much different message had been drafted days before. However, in the event, the president opted for a military strike. And I quote, "This morning I reluctantly order the armed forces to attack and destroy the nuclear buildup in Cuba," began the address that JFK never delivered. Number 4. A Soviet spy was a valuable mole, believe it or not. Colonel Oleg Penkovsky. Yeah, that's how you pronounce it. A Soviet military intelligence officer passed along vital espionage about Soviet missile systems, including technical manuals to the CIA and British intelligence officials. That knowledge was extremely valuable for CIA agents. Analyzing the aerial photographs taken over Cuba on October 22nd, 1962, KGB officials arrested Penkovsky in Moscow, and it is believed he was convicted of espionage and executed in 1963. Number 5. To keep news of the crisis from leaking, a concocted cold was blamed for President Kennedy's cancellation of public events. Yeah, so that's basically what happened to him. President Kennedy attempted to maintain his official schedule, including a planned 7-state campaign swing in advance of midterm elections. The president's physician made up the story that Kennedy's voice had been husky the night before and that he was suffering from a cold and a slight fever even. While aides told the press that Kennedy would spend the rest of the day in bed, he instead went into 5 hours of meetings with advisors before deciding on instituting a naval blockade of Cuba. Number 6. There were American combat fatalities, believe it or not. On October 27, 1962, a Soviet-supplied surface-to-air missile downed an American U-2 plane, killing its pilot, Major Rudolph Anderson Jr. President Kennedy awarded him the Distinguished Service Medal. 4 days before Anderson's death, a C-135 Air Force transport bringing supplies to Guantanamo Naval Air Station on Cuba crashed on landing, killing its crew of 7 people. That is sad, ladies and gentlemen. Very sad, boys. Number 7. Both sides compromised. Yeah, that happened. Of course, that happens like every war. U.S. Secretary of State Dean Russ said of the Cuban Missile Crisis, and I quote, "We're eyeball to eyeball, and I think the other fellow just blinked." That assessment is one-sided. In 1962, October 28th, Soviet leader Nikita Khrushchev ordered the removal of Soviet nuclear missiles from Cuba. It wasn't a unilateral move. The Americans also secretly pledged to withdraw nuclear missiles from Turkey and, kind of promised not to invade Cuba. Yeah, that's something they did. Number 8. Secret backdoor diplomacy rather than brinksmanship diffused the crisis. So, very backhanded stuff. Like, what was his face? Like, Eisenhower, I think it was. Very backhanded indeed. Once Kennedy announced the blockade, the Americans and Soviets were in regular communication. The October 22nd agreement was hammered out the night before in a secret meeting between Attorney General Robert Kennedy and Soviet Ambassador Anatoly Dobrynin. Whatever. The Attorney General's outreach and offer to remove missiles from Turkey was so ambiguous that only a handful of presidential advisors were aware of it at the time. Anyway, moving on to number 9. The Cuban Missile Crisis lasted more than just 13 days. Yeah, it was 13 days from when Bundy showed Kennedy the incriminating U-2 photographs to Radio Moscow's announcement of Khrushchev's decision to remove the missiles. Even though the world saw another day of peace on that 13th day, the tense situation did not suddenly go away, as is in most situations. The U.S. military remained on its highest state of alert for 3 more weeks as it monitored the removal of the missiles. They gotta make sure they're out of there, just no backhanded stuff. Anyway, last and not least, number 10. Although the Kennedy administration thought all the Soviet nukes were gone, they weren't. Again, with the backhanded stuff. President Kennedy, satisfied with Soviet assurances that all nuclear weapons had been removed, lifted the Cuban blockade on November 20th. 1962 recently saw that Soviet documents revealed, however, that while Khrushchev, promised to dismantle everything and, take out range missiles known to the Kennedy administration, he left behind about 100 tactical nuclear weapons which the Americans did not know about for decades, for possible use in repelling invading forces. You know, you never know when you gotta use those things. Khrushchev had intended to train the Cubans and transfer the missiles to them, as long as they kept the presence a secret. Soviet concerns about whether Castro should be trusted with nuclear weapons, you know, that was a concern. However, they were finally removed from Cuba on December 1st, 1962. I'm pretty jumbled up right now, and yeah, so that just happened. Anyway, that was 10 things you may or may not have known about Cuban Missile Crisis. I know this is something different, and this is not something you see every day. In fact, you don't see a video any day. But other than that, I hope you enjoyed it. I did too, boys. So, and girls. And doggies. I enjoyed this. Yes, and cats. And fish. Anyway, hope you enjoyed that. I had somewhat amount of fun doing this. It's definitely something different. If you want more, just leave the comment down below that you would like to see episode 2 of whatever the heck this is. Amii's Time Machine. We can do another episode. And I can finally say, welcome back. Anyway, hope you enjoyed, and as always, thank you, and come again.